that we can share with others afterward. I want to introduce Greg Bugby, our presenter today. Greg's the Chief Information Security Officer at Novus Insight, and he has been specializing in IT strategy and cybersecurity and data solutions for public and nonprofit sectors. Greg has over 20 years of experience and a CISSP certification, and he brings a deep understanding of government operations. He's previously served as both a municipal IT director and a K through 12 district technology leader, which I can't imagine what those positions entail. Lots of organization and lots of skills. So we're thrilled that Greg has joined us today. At Novus, Greg leads cybersecurity and IT modernization efforts for nonprofits in towns and school districts. And he's overseen projects such as the Connecticut Municipal Cloud and has helped numerous nonprofits enhance their security posture, manage risk, and meet compliance standards, including CGIS, HIPAA, and FERPA. So, Greg, welcome and thank you so much. A few people were saying at the beginning they're a little bit nervous about this topic.
I
So
know.
please set our minds at ease.
Well, we'll start with some scaries, but then we'll get to setting our minds at ease for sure. And Allison, yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, and also thank you to the Community Foundation of Greater New Haven for hosting this event, and thank you for everybody for attending today too. It's great to take a little bit of time out of our days to pause a little bit and kind of reflect on cybersecurity and some of the threats that we face, but also learn about the things that we can do. I think that that's most important. Like I said, we're going to start with some big scaries today, but then we're going to transition quickly into how do I deal with these things. And that's the whole point of this year. At Novus, we've been working with nonprofit organizations both in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Florida. We're strategic partners with the Florida Nonprofit Alliance, the Connecticut Nonprofit Alliance, various community foundations, and this is the world that we live in. And nonprofits, unfortunately, are really at a pivotal point now where things are being really ramped up as far as attacks against nonprofits. We're seeing a lot of actual targeted attacks against nonprofit organizations, and a lot of it has to do, unfortunately, with the political climate that we live in today as well. So it's really unfortunate. But it's a reality that we're dealing with. I mean, before a lot of this, ramped up over the past couple of years, we were dealing with nation state attackers. By the way, they're still out there. Cybercrime is something that affects every organization, and with nation states like North Korea, Russia, Iran, that's their export. They don't make stuff that they can export on the free market to support those countries. So they export cybercrime, and they don't care how big or small your organization is. Their goal is just to cast a wide net and get whatever money they can possibly get. So we often hear in the nonprofit sector, oh, we're just a nonprofit. We're not a target. Oh, we're a small organization. We're 5 people. We're not a target. Any organization with a dollar to steal, there's somebody who actually wants to steal it. And it can be devastating to an organization when you don't have a huge budget, uh, when things go off the rails and you end up with monetary loss. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. Our agenda today, we're going to talk about some really big scaries. One of them happened in Connecticut recently. We're going to talk a little bit about understanding some specific cyber threats that face nonprofits, really any organization, what the financial impact of a cyber incident could be against your organization. We're going to do a little simulation today as well. And we're going to talk about insurance and some actionable strategies that you can put in place to help protect yourself. So a couple of things, and we did some introductions, so it was great to meet everybody at the top of the call. But I would love to learn from some folks on the call if you just want to kind of pop off of mute. And the question that I would like to kind of open up with is, what is the number one thing that you can think of that would be a catastrophic cyber incident? What makes that incident catastrophic? and what might you be doing to protect yourself from this bad thing from happening? So does anybody have anything that's top of mind that you're like, hey, this one big thing would really hurt us, and we've been thinking about this. This keeps me up at night. Does anybody want to chime in with an example?
Um, I'll chime in again, Alicia Dolce, Build Green CT. And partly this is inspired by the individual I spoke about, who actually was the president of a club, an EV club in Connecticut that had all of its content taken over by a bot. It lost everything. Right? So I think that website, we don't have a bricks and mortar building. That we're an education content resource provider, not
Alicia, we're not hearing you
Yeah,
clearly.
you're
You're
kind
cutting
of
out.
going.
um, um,
No, we lost you. It started out great, but
can you hear me now?
yes.
It's this, I was afraid of that. So our website really lives, our nonprofit lives and dies by its website because of we're an educational resource provider, and we have a membership directory. Like everything we do and provide, most of what we do is online, even though we do in-person events. My point is, if something happened in our website, what was blown up, right? Something that would be a catastrophe for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would really, that would keep that keeps me up at night.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great insight. And we work with a lot of membership organizations and organizations that have databases like that, and you need that up and running. I was just chatting with a nonprofit this morning, and we were talking about they do a lot of events and they receive a lot of revenue from events. And if their event services were down, and it's all with a third party, but they're like, yeah, if that went down for an extended period of time, we would be out of a lot of money. And that would provide real harm. The other side of that too is reputational. If something bad happens to your member database or your website, there's some reputational harm that could take place with that as well. And that's something that's difficult to quantify in financial terms, but it's something that could affect your brand. Anyone else? Anyone else have a big scary that they would like to chat through? What keeps you up at night? Somebody has something in chat here. We can bring this up here. A breach affecting the whole database, stealing information or holding the site for ransom. Absolutely. We see a lot of ransomware still out there today. It's not as common as it was, a few years back, but it's still happening. But information theft along with that ransomware, that's a big thing today. And I'll go through some scenarios today that speak to that. Anyone else? Jim, I
This,
see you popped off mute.
yeah, I did. We were hit by a ransomware attack, I would say probably about 4 years ago, but it was really, really serious, and it took our IT people quite a while to be able to deal with it, and then also to be able to recover documents that were lost in the process. So we were not able to regain. So we did not pay ransom, but it was definitely hard and challenging for us to get the ransomware removed and be able to restore our normal operations.
Absolutely. And when you're trying to deliver your mission, whatever your mission might be, and your business is interrupted during that time, there's cost to that as well. Um, Anyone have anything else? Okay. Um, a quick show of hands if you want to use the raise hand function here. Uh, does, does everyone have cyber insurance today? No. No. Okay. So one thing that you can do, if we're kind of looking at how do we mitigate some of this or transfer some of that risk, and we'll talk about that today, is cyber insurance kind of serves two levels of this. There's certain things that cyber insurance companies look favorably on, and those are good mitigations to risk. But then when the bad thing happens, you have a partner that you can transfer some of that risk to financially and helps you weather the storm. So we'll talk a little bit about the role of cyber insurance for nonprofits. And just to paint a little bit of a picture at the start of the conversation, it is not this big, expensive, scary thing that it once was. We're seeing small organizations, let's say your budget is between $1 and $3 million. Um, you can get $1 million coverage policy, comprehensive coverage policy for around $1,000 a year, if that's your annual operating budget. If you're below $1 million, you can get a $500,000 policy that'll help you weather storms, for $500 to $1,000, that range. So it's not this, $20,000 expense anymore. The prices have come down and the policies are very comprehensive. So we'll talk about this in a lot more detail as we go through this, but would highly recommend, if you don't have cyber insurance, look into it, especially because we might be able to spend $1,000 in coverage and then $1,000 for your deductible or retention instead of having to pay out, thousands of dollars for IT services, or if you lose money through, like an example that we're about to look at here, as one nonprofit did in Connecticut, cyber crime, where money just disappears because you transferred it to a malicious party. Getting $300,000 back for a $2,000 investment is actually a pretty good return on that policy. Well, thank you for the participation here. We'll hop in and again, everybody feel free to chime in throughout with questions, use the raise hand, throw things into chat. I'm happy to take questions or pause along the way. I want this to be as interactive as we possibly can. But just absolutely do chime in. So I want to bring people's attention to something that happened this past year with an organization in Hartford called the Blue Hills Civic Association. And they're kind of an interesting organization because they fund other nonprofits in the community. They receive state funding and will redistribute it to help sponsor community programs. And one of the programs that they sponsored up in the Blue Hills area of Hartford was a summer youth employment program. So little history here about what happened with them and how this particular incident played out. So in December, they had a very complex wire transfer fraud situation happening. Basically, the organization has shuttered their doors and laid off all of their employees as a result of this particular incident. And as a result, their summer youth employment program has been canceled. Apparently, they had hundreds of youth who were going to be employed this summer and now volunteers, former employees who were laid off because of the cyber incident, are now scrambling to try and pull together a program with funding from other funders in the community to put kids to work this summer. And the ripple effects of this one incident are quite widespread. I'll take you through it. Here are the details. So they had about $5 million in federal pandemic relief grants. And a nonprofit that they work with had their email compromised. There was a transfer of about $300,000 that was supposed to go to this nonprofit to fund programs. An attacker got into that nonprofit's email system and convinced Blue Hills Civic Association to change the transfer account information on this funds transfer. $300,000 was siphoned off. So a couple of things happened. There was a contractual obligation in that $5 million that was coming from the state that if there's ever a cyber incident, you have to report it to the state. They didn't report on time. And that caused a contractual violation with the state of Connecticut, who basically withheld all funding at this point from the nonprofit. So they're out $300,000. Now they're out $5 million, and they're saying, how do we meet payroll? And that trust erosion with the state due to the delayed communication resulted in that immediate consequence. Now they're being audited. A full forensic audit is taking place at Blue Hills. This just kept growing and growing and growing. So the impact on them is that DECD has suspended all current and future payments to them. 30 employees are terminated, and the community programs are no longer taking place this summer. Operations halted. Reputation, if there is any reputation to salvage, because the organization is basically on pause right now. And now the FBI and Harvard Police are starting an investigation into this, as well as the forensic audits coming from the state. So massive impact on this nonprofit. Did anybody hear about this in the news? No? Okay. Definitely look into it. There's news articles all around about this, and this is where we pulled a lot of the information from related to this. So what were the critical failures with this here? So first thing is lack of wire transfer controls. And you might be saying, hey, we're here to talk about tech. Why are we talking about wire transfers? Well, this originated as part of an email scheme. This nonprofit fell victim to a phishing email, and somebody gained access to their systems. And then that attacker said, ooh, I see a bigger fish that I can go after in Blue Hills. I can siphon off $300,000 because I have this information here. And attackers are very, very smart. When an attack happens, they pull all of your email out, and then they start running it through AI, and they start figuring out, where can I go from here? And they're very crafty with their AI prompts. They're really good at it. And they look at, how does this person write? How do I write a convincing email as them to get those folks at Blue Hills to give over money to me? And they were able to mimic those speech patterns and, basically convince them through email to make this transfer happen. One of the big things is that Blue Hills clearly lacked some protocols to be like, hey, I got this weird email from you, nonprofit. I'm going to pick up the phone and call somebody there and actually verify that this transfer request is real. It just kind of sailed through. So one big takeaway over here is have a verification process for your nonprofit. If somebody's saying change your invoice, change financial information, have a process in place to say, hey, we're going to pick up the phone. We're going to call somebody, not call the number that's in their email, but legitimately call somebody I know over there. We all have relationships. We're small organizations, and we have the ability to contact people. But also internally, have a couple of different layers to this. Hey, can somebody else look at this? This doesn't look right. Have dual authorizations for this as well, so that there's checks and balances on these types of wire transfer pieces here. And then those callback procedures. So that's one piece that stands out here. And one of the things that we're hosting our policy and procedure boot camps. That's kind of an add-on to this program today. But throughout the year, we're partnering with different organizations to help create these types of policies and procedures for nonprofits. So lots of options to get into this, but definitely this is something that you want to put in place at your nonprofit if you don't have this already. Any questions so far? Everybody scared? A little bit. Yeah. So the other piece was a lack of awareness of the contractual obligations. So that grant from the state had a cyber reporting clause in it that said you have to let us know. And there's delays in here. So one of the things that can happen is if you don't report, let's say you have a contractual agreement with the state, well, what happened here could happen to you. But another contractual obligation to be aware of is like if you have cyber insurance, there's an obligation to report cyber incidents to your insurance company. And you only have a limited time frame to report those cyber incidents within. So if you fail to do that, you could also forfeit your ability to have a cyber insurance payout. Or in some cases like this wire transfer thing, the FBI are the folks to report it to, and they can help you if you report it within 72 hours. They might be able to claw back the funds. So there's a window that's there. Understand your contractual obligations. If you have to report to a funder that you had a breach, that needs to be cataloged somewhere, and you have to know how to do it. All right. No formal incident response plan. Clearly, they didn't have a plan to deal with this. One of the quotes that came out in the news was that they had asked a state senator, "What should we do?" Probably not a good idea to ask a politician, "What should we do?" in the event of an incident. You should have your own plan. And the politician said, the state senator said, yeah, don't report that. Um, yeah, not the right answer. You want to have a plan that illustrates what you should be doing when there's an incident that happens. And it's really important to do that. You need those reporting requirements. When do I have to report it? To whom? Um, know how to control the message related to this. If your org transfers out $300,000 and you're like, oh no, you want to let the staff know, hey, let's put a lid on this so we can get this under control. And you want to engage legal counsel as soon as possible. This is what insurance is there for. When you engage legal counsel, everything's protected under attorney-client privilege. And now you have the ability to control the messaging related to this. The rumor mill can start going really fast. Oh my gosh, Blue Hills just lost $300,000. Well, if that happens in the first 8 hours and you have the ability to claw that back, well, the word is already out there. It's different than reporting. Reporting and then controlling the messaging, those are two different things. You have to report. What you have to report is important, to whom you report it to, and then also what privilege is it protected under. A lot to consider here. You have to guide your team. Who's going to say what, who's going to control the message. All of those things are important. So lack of cyber insurance. $300,000, just so folks know, we're going to look at a cyber insurance policy in a little bit. But one of the things with cyber insurance policies is like this cyber crime is typically one of the things that they put limits on. And the limit in most policies now is about $250,000. So that $300,000 would have been over that threshold. But had they had cyber insurance, they may have been able to pay uh, back to Blue Hills 250K, and then the Delta impact would have been 50 plus some investigation on that. Lot smaller impact than the 300K. And if they had cyber insurance, they would have had a breach coach to help them through the reporting and the attorney-client privilege and all of those other things. So, yes, all of those things are super important here. So lessons. You need cybersecurity awareness in your organization. Nonprofits are vulnerable, very attractive to hackers. Um, there were two nonprofits who fell victim to this here. Blue Hills was one, but then that nonprofit that started all of this, the nonprofit that they were sending the money to. You need strong defenses as well. So training people, having policies and procedures, and making folks aware of these threats. The fact that you're all here today really contributes to that last piece of needing strong defenses. You're gaining the skills to put your shields up here today. All right, any questions, feedback so far? Everybody going back and starting to get some financial policies established for your org? If you don't have them already? These are a few things that you can start doing and looking into. Written financial policies. Have this stuff written down. Have your finance people follow it. Train them on it. Fraud recognition. What are some things to look for in those emails? Hey, I'm changing my wire transfer account information. I need it done right away. Otherwise, I'm not going to get the funding. Some kind of sense of urgency is what these attackers will put into these emails to prey on you and say, hey, do this fast. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem. I need the money now because I can't make payroll. Things along those lines are things that the attackers will do in here. So train your staff to look for these things and also establish some guidelines for the use of your IT resources as well. Those types of things will help prevent you being the other nonprofit, who then causes an incident of a Blue Hills as well. An incident response plan, you definitely need one if you don't have one, but this is something that would definitely help you here. And then also practice your plan. Those are really important things. Run these scenarios through the plan and see how your team reacts. Has anybody done a tabletop exercise for an incident response plan? No, Jim, you went through a ransomware incident, so you did trial by fire there, and you practiced, live with the ransomware. But has anybody else been through a cyber incident before?
We haven't been through a cyber incident like this, but the one thing that we have had is because we do offer, like for example, I was saying like event tickets and things like that, or memberships, payments over our website, and we do get fraud alerts. We got it with our old payment processor, and now we get it with our new payment processor from time to time. So we're trying to always keep ahead of it and put safeguards in place. But I would say 2 months ago, there were like an ungodly amount of fraudulent transactions, small amount, and they didn't really materialize, but it's enough to rock your world for that time period that you're dealing with it. And of course you're hoping like it's a nothing burger, but again you're just hoping like, well, I don't know, it's very, this is not, none of us I think are experts in this, so this is if nothing else just highly disruptive to
Yes.
what we're supposed to be doing.
And Alicia, to your point, when's the real one going to happen, right? The real big one.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this example you gave is unbelievable.
Yes. Yeah. Lot of things didn't go right in this scenario here. The other thing is understand contracts. We get a lot of contracts as nonprofits. Different funders have different requirements. Read the fine print. We're working right now in Jacksonville, Florida with Kids Hope Alliance. They're a funder that is part of the city of Jacksonville. They have all kinds of contract stipulations that go out to nonprofits. One of theirs is you have to report cyber incidents to us within 72 hours, and it doesn't matter whether it affects our data directly. If you have a cyber incident, you need to report it to us and let us know that you're having one. They're interconnected with data sharing right now. So a cyber incident that happens at one of their provider agencies could flow up to them. And then also as a funder of the community with kids data, they're the type of organization that's going to be asked questions if one of their provider agencies has a cyber incident. So it flows upstream to them. Those requirements are in there. Jim, question? And you're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Yes, so we are constantly getting emails. There are all different degrees of sophistication that hackers use, and some of them are extremely amateurish. So, for example, just having a staff member's name and then a strange, unrecognizable Gmail address and a request to the payroll department to change banks or something like that. I mean, those are really amateurish, and I think most of my staff members understand that these are phishing expeditions. But the sophisticated spammers are really being able to use things that look very real. I mean, you don't want to just trust the fact that they've stolen logos from an organization and that they look like they're real. DocuSign is another one that frequently is somebody who's asking for, for DocuSign and other kinds of things. But, the better the spammer is, the better the hacker is, the more sophisticated and more real that it looks. And so that's why I worry about the fact that there could be something that would escape my staff members and allow for someone to get in because, as we say, well, how did they get into my computer? Well, inadvertently or not, you invited them in, and
Yes.
so that's the trick, and that's the thing that needs to be avoided at all costs.
And Jim, great point. And in the Blue Hills case, that attack was launched from the nonprofit's email. So everything, the initial nonprofit that was attacked was the launching point, and they clearly didn't know that somebody was in their system sending emails as them. Yeah, so that's how these attacks spread too.
Right. And the other thing is that that when someone gets into the email system, if you simply respond and say, "Is this really from you?" They will get that message and they will say, "Yes, it's really from me." So what I do in cases like that is that I'll just call them on the phone and say, "Did you send
Absolutely.
this out?" And they say, "No, we've been hacked." And I said, "Well, that's what I figured, but I just wanted to call to be sure."
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice on that. Always pick up the phone, and we have to go old school with communication on those types of things. And it's, any electronic communication, because let's say you're communicating, if two organizations have Microsoft Teams, you can chat between two different organizations now. If you send somebody a Teams message and they've been hacked, there's a high likelihood that that attacker is already in their Teams system as well. So don't trust any communication other than one that's completely out of band, like a telephone call to somebody you actually know. That's really important too. All right, so cyber insurance, the other piece over here is, making sure they have a cyber insurance policy. Cyber insurance can do a lot for you, including getting that money back, but also figuring out what happened and any legal fees that are associated with that. And then if there's fines that are levied or anything along those lines or PR support, yeah, cyber insurance can do that as well. Couple immediate steps for folks right here. We talked about some of these over here as well, but yeah, there's definitely a lot that you can do right now. So a few threats that we want to take a look at. So we've talked a little bit about phishing. We've talked a little bit about ransomware, where your data's been locked up. One of the big things with ransomware now is that ransomware and stealing data are one and the same now. So if you're ransomware, you have to assume that they've stolen all of your data. That's really important. Um, we had served as breach consultants for a nonprofit that was breached. They had a ransomware attack, and uh, we were brought in to help restore the organization from backup. While we were working with them to do their recovery, their board members started getting emails saying, "Hey, we have all of your client information, and we're going to release it publicly if you don't pay a second ransom to us in the form of an extortion payment." That's how these attackers work. So ransomware equals data breach. And when we're talking about data breach, here's another quick thing that I want to point out, and I'll go through these in a little bit more detail. When we're talking about data breaches, we really want to think about things like an attacker gains access to your email. Well, what's in your email? Think about what's in your email, what's in your staff's email. Where do people put stuff? They keep it in their email. People use email as their filing cabinet. And when we've worked with nonprofits as breach consultants, what we've seen is sometimes if the right person at an organization has an email compromise, it can lead to a lot of personally identifiable information being exposed. And sometimes we see 1,200 people impacted just when an email box has been accessed by an attacker. You get the right person at a nonprofit, like a case manager or somebody in finance who's dealing with social security numbers or employee data, and we're emailing around socials, and all of those emails for a bunch of employees or program participants are in an email box. One attack can expose all of that data, and then you're on the hook for paying out for identity protection for those folks for 2 years. That can get very costly. So why are nonprofits attacked? Well, we said everybody's a target. No org is too small to be attacked. But, you know, we've got this other thing called budget challenges, and attackers know that. And overhead is kind of a dirty word in the nonprofit world, unfortunately. And one of the things is that hey, we do have to protect data to run our programs. There's a cost to doing that. So one thing I like to tell people is, especially in the nonprofit sector, as you're building out your programs, make sure that you're adding in what it truly costs to protect data. And that's a really important factor over here. We also have a lot of valuable data, and we have medical data in some nonprofits. We have employee data. We have our donor data. We're taking credit cards. We're also seeing a lot of hacktivism today. And then in the Blue Hills case, we saw trusted access to others. We saw a funder that the nonprofit had a trusted relationship with. Those two worlds connected and caused this loss of funds. They knew once they got into that nonprofit's email that there was $300,000 hanging out there from Blue Hills. How do we get that? That was their goal, and they successfully did it. So this is huge to be able to, understand why we're attacked and understand the relationships. And I'm really thankful that the Community Foundation as a funder is sponsoring this today because, as a nonprofit working with a community foundation, you have the ability to protect your funder as well. And that's an important obligation to recognize too. We want to preserve those funding streams, especially when funding is at risk in many places as well today. So something to keep in mind there. Any questions so far? No. So the impact, of course, reputational loss, uh, damage to donor trust, and we definitely want to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to preserve these things. Financial impact of a cyber incident. So, wanted to talk a little bit about records really quick, and not the kind that I have in my basement that I play on the record player, but we have a lot of data as nonprofits, and one of the things that we have is records on employees, records on vendors, records on the people that we serve. And when we're talking about a record, we're talking about their digital footprint. Um, Personally identifiable information comes to mind. You run programs, and those programs require that you have data on people. So when we're talking about that, we want to make sure that we're protecting those records, but it's also a way of calculating, how much would it cost if we got breached? And I'll go through some cost scenarios in a second over here. So how do we identify records? Because if you're going for cyber insurance, you're going to want to know how many records you have. And what type of records does your org maintain? We have employee data, socials, payroll, things like that. We have our donors, we have our credit card information there, and we have records on the people that we serve or our members or whatever that's there. How many records do we have? Where are they? What systems are they in? Does somebody have them in an Excel sheet? That's the other thing. It's like, hey, we've got this super secure database that we spent a lot of money on, and then somebody writes an Excel report and dumps all of that data out to Excel and then emails it to somebody. Well, now you've just taken those records from that super secure spot and you've now made like 3 or 4 copies of it and sent it everywhere. If there's a breach, you're going to find out that, hey, we had these records in email, and if there's an exposure, the forensics teams are going to go through that and say, oh, wow, you owe these people money now in the form of identity protection. So just something to consider is like, where do those records go? So I wanted to do a little risk scenario over here. So let's say you have a ransomware incident and your systems go down, and you have operational disruption because all of a sudden you can't do what you were going to do. You can't provide service to people. You can't bill insurance for the services that you're providing. Let's say you're doing HIPAA covered entity type work. You have productivity loss. In nonprofits, we all wear so many different hats, right? And now all of a sudden, your program folks are pulled off because they're dealing with the cyber insurance folks, and there's downtime. Now people are calling because they can't get the services that they need. Your board is now involved. The donors are aware. There's people communicating with the media. And now we've got legal and compliance because the data's been exfiltrated. So let's just look at 16,000 records for an organization. That could be about $3 million in expenses related to a breach. That's a lot of money. Breaches cost a lot of money. And, we can do just a quick breach simulation. I'll bring this up over here in a second here. And even a small impact over here, I'm going to bring over this report in a second over here. I'm just running a simulation over on the other screen. But even a small breach of like 1,200 records can cost about $1 million or so. If we look at this one over here, this is a very small data breach. We had 120 records here and very little loss. But just this, if we look at this over here, depending upon what happens, we're looking at, $250,000 in breach expenses just for a very small breach. We see this constantly within organizations. It adds up. It adds up. And if we wanted to go with a major data loss, let's say 1,200 records, and we wanted to assess the impact of this, we'll just run this simulation really quick. This is all public source data that we run through this simulator here. If we go up to 1,200 records, it's about $2 million, near 3, depending upon what we have going on. So breaches are very expensive and they could put organizations out of business very quickly. Why does it cost so much? It takes special people, specialized people to help with these types of things. When somebody's information is exposed, we have 50 states with 50 different data privacy laws. You have records on employees who have probably moved across the country. Let's say your payroll system's breached. Based upon the data that's in your payroll system and where they live at the time of the breach, they may be entitled to all kinds of different things. So let's just say you have, 50 employees. If 50 employees plus another 100 employees that you had archived in your payroll system are breached, and they were breached through your login being breached, forensics is going to come in and track down where do they live and what are they entitled to. That's a lot of work to do all of that. And then legal on top of that, there's a lawyer who has to get involved, and lawyers are not inexpensive. They start billing at about $650 an hour. And forensics teams, they start billing at about $350 to $400 an hour. It gets very expensive to do this. And then to bring everything back online costs a lot of money. So they're not inexpensive. And, this is another simulation over here with, 1,900 records. This is just a breach where they pulled it out. Nothing malicious like somebody's email box. That's about $1 million right there. So think about those expenses. Think about your organization and how much it costs to go through something like this. And would you be able to weather that storm if something bad happened? And that's all you have to do is be able to get through it, and survive another day to do your mission. That's all we're trying to do here is get you to that point where you can. Too many organizations go out of business due to cyber incidents. 1 in 7 small businesses in this country are not equipped to deal with a major cyber incident. 1 in 7 would go out of business if they had a major cyber attack. So we're in the same category as nonprofits. Any questions or comments so far before I go on to this next piece here?
I actually have a question, and I don't know if you're going to cover this later or not, but when you were talking about thinking about where things are stored or how often you maybe will take information and you'll export it into an Excel file and whatnot, it made me curious about digital archive systems. And the nonprofit that I work for uses Google Drive or Google Workspace for nonprofits. And that's where we keep the lion's share of our information. And another nonprofit that I serve on the board for uses Microsoft OneDrive. Very clunky and difficult to use. I'm wondering if there are do you have an opinion on whether one is more secure than the other or less, less vulnerable to attacks?
Everything is equally as vulnerable. I'll start with that. But I do want to go down the path of digital record retention. Both of those platforms that you mentioned, Alicia, have the ability to kind of look at retention of data and how we retain data and where we retain it. Both of them have good tools built into them for being able to say, I only need to keep this data for this long. Take the data that I have that I need to archive and put it in a vault or apply a policy to it that limits who has access to it. And then I can pull things out of the archive if I need to, but I don't need everybody in the organization to have old stuff accessible all the time, especially old sensitive data. And that's a good way of kind of looking at it. Like Google Vault is great for that because you can really limit the permissions on it and move a bunch of stuff into Vault that hasn't been accessed in a bunch of years. Microsoft does the same thing with retention tags, and you can limit that access in archiving. But if you haven't touched it in a long time, um, probably don't want to have everybody have access to it.
Yeah, that's very helpful feedback. I know one of the things that we're doing, and has been weighing on our mind, but what's a nonprofit to do is we do have like a spreadsheet with like master passwords
Mm-hmm.
for the workspace, because and of course it's limited access, but it's not in a vault. So it sounds like there's exposure there for us.
Yeah, that's a different type of exposure. We're going to talk a little bit about
Okay,
password
good.
managers in a few
Great.
minutes.
Thank you so much. That's so relevant.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And to that point, um, passwords in Excel files, passwords in Google Sheets. It's one of the first places that an attacker will go. They have tools that kind of seek those things out and will look for them. And and I know this because we actually have those tools ourselves, and we get alerts with some of the software that we have when somebody's using Excel or Word to store passwords. So if we have it, the bad guys have it too. So something to definitely look into for sure. And we'll give you some strategies on how to protect that those passwords too. Any other questions? Great questions, Alicia. Anybody else with any thoughts or questions before we hop into this cyber insurance piece here?
Greg, this is Allie from United Way, and I know we work with you on some of this stuff. But one of my questions, and you may get to it later as well, is how possible is it for a nonprofit to come back online? This, if they have, let's say they have the insurance, let's say they have the funds to come back online in a safe way, and just that process of getting back online, being able to get back into operations as usual, like how possible is that given just the expansive, threats that we see on the daily now?
Yeah, we'll dive into that a little bit uh, deeper with a couple of things that we're going to talk about that cyber insurance companies recommend that nonprofits have in place to help them be more resilient. And I think, Allie, that comes down to resiliency. How do we make our organizations more resilient? Because a cyber attack will happen. It's how do you bounce back from that? That's the most important thing. And resiliency is very multifaceted. If we look at like Blue Hills as an example, that financial impact was not recoverable for them. So how could they have done that? How could they have weathered that? They likely should have sat down and done some risk analysis to say, hey, if something bad happened like this, how do we bounce back from it? Can we insure against it? What can we do? That was a catastrophic event. And we also recommend that organizations kind of dive into thresholding what's going to put you out of business. What dollar amount would cause you to go out of business? Have that real conversation with your board and say, okay, this would be catastrophic. We can insure up to this amount, and we're going to try and weather the storm for anything above this amount because we have some insurance in place. Do we need more insurance? Maybe. Can we even buy more insurance? Those are questions that you need to ask. But also from a technical standpoint, coming back from an attack, that varies very extensively by the organization and what's involved. Like the financial attack, that's one thing. A single email account, you can bounce back from that pretty quickly, but there's still maybe payout related to that. There's going to be financial impact with that. A ransomware event, a lot of that depends upon how your nonprofit has planned their IT strategy and what tools and services they're using to limit the attack. We'll talk about which ones the insurance companies recommend to help you become more cyber resilient. And that's actually a really good starting point because they are the risk experts when it comes to this. They're the ones who have to pay out. So it's in their incentive to make you more resilient and give you a path to insurability, but also that path equals a resilient path as well. So I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes here. Great question. Thank you, though. Any other questions before we hop into this next piece? No? Okay. All right. So cyber insurance and risk management. What does cyber insurance cover? Why do I harp on this here? Because it's very difficult to weather the storm without these types of resources available to you. So cyber insurance gives you coverage for a data breach. Anything that's related to a data breach, legal representation, notifications, the payout, all of those things are covered in there. Public relations. Small nonprofits don't typically have a PR person on staff. You need somebody who can communicate, talk to your board, talk to the community, manage that PR for you. You know, the thing with Blue Hills that kind of popped out to me is that it came out in the news that they had asked the state senator about what to do. That's kind of weird. If they had cyber insurance and a PR person, that probably wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't be asking the state senator in the first place, but then there would have been enough of a lid on this and enough of a tailoring of the message to keep this transparent, but also effective with communication. And that effective communication means internal and external as well. They help you reduce the financial burden. So how do you weather the storm over here? Thank you, Kathleen, by the way. They give you the resources for recovery. So, Allie, to your point that you had made about how do we bounce back, the insurance companies, like if your hardware, for example, there's actually attacks that will destroy your computer, like physically destroy your computer. We saw these with Russia and Ukraine, where computers were actually being fried through cyber attacks, and it's called bricking. They're basically unusable after the attack takes place. And cyber insurance has coverage for that. So if you had an attack that resulted in your laptops not being usable, you call up your cyber insurance company and they do a little analysis and they say, we're shipping you 20 new laptops and we're going to help get you the IT resources that you need to configure it and build back from that. That's how you bounce back fast, is you have that plan. Um, Operational continuity. So your downtime, the cyber insurance company will bring in additional experts and additional hands to get you back up and running fast. So this is the way to go, especially when it's $1,000 and $1,000 per incident. If you can get one for that price range, you're doing really well if something bad happens. Because like I said, this stuff can cost a lot of money. So what does a good policy look like? This is an example on the left of what a not so good policy looks like. And up here, I'll explain what these mean over here. So third-party coverages. Alicia, you were talking about your membership database. I'm assuming that's in some cloud platform with some third party.
Actually, we use Salesforce.
Okay, Salesforce. Perfect.
Yep.
So Salesforce goes down or has a breach or something along those lines, and you're like, I lost business, I lost trust because of that. Well, you can contact your cyber insurance company if you have it and then say, Salesforce caused this, but here's my impact. Go after Salesforce to recoup my losses. And they will. We call this third party dependent coverage. And then your first party, this is you. So if you had a ransomware or an extortion, those would be the types of things that would be covered, the business interruption, the reputation damage, things like that. Again, this policy on the left, they didn't put a lot of stuff in here. And I want to caution nonprofits on this because you'll see like Paychex, for example, that say, yeah, we have cyber insurance. And it looks a lot like this on the level. It's got a big limit. You see the $1 million figure up here, but then there's a lot of stuff that's not included in here. And then you get down to this crime coverage. This is Blue Hills down here, by the way. Blue Hills had cybercrime. Right down here, not included. They were socially engineered and they had electronic theft that took place. So these two things down at the bottom under that crime coverage is what would have had Blue Hills weather the storm. On the right is a good policy where you have up to that $250,000 in coverage on those cyber crimes, and then all of this other stuff is included to help you get through things. So that's what a good policy looks like. If anyone would ever want their cyber policy, or if you're going shopping for one reviewed, we have a firm that we work with who will do a free, no obligation review of the cyber policies and tell you, hey, this is what you should probably do. Ask your broker about it, and help you negotiate on your behalf. They're a partner organization. There's no financial transaction between Novus and the organization. They're just really good at cyber insurance, and they're happy to help nonprofits. So be happy to put anybody in touch who's looking for cyber insurance sounding board for this purpose. So a couple of other things on this over here. So premiums are based on a lot of different factors here, including your revenue. So the insurance companies are going to look at this and say, okay, you're a $3 million nonprofit. You should probably have $1 million in coverage. You're an under $1 million nonprofit, maybe $500,000 is good for you. Your business obligations. Are you a HIPAA covered entity? That's going to raise your risk, because HIPAA's got fines and different things like that are associated with it that they may have to pay out for. So expect to pay more if you're in a higher risk group like HIPAA or have a lot of sensitive data records. If you're doing the right things for security, the insurance companies are going to look favorably on that. And they're going to say, we're going to give you a discount. So document what you're doing and put it in front of the insurance companies, and they'll give you a good deal. This is a little bit dated. We're now seeing these lower, in the past month, we've actually seen the low end come down to about $1,000. But we've, for HIPAA covered entities and other organizations that are higher risk, the cost can go higher. But $1 million in coverage between 1,000, 3,000 for the average nonprofit, and then up from there for others that have more sensitive needs. So how do I get myself insured and save money on insurance? First thing is kind of understand your risk as an organization. What data, going back to those records, what records do I have? You want to be transparent with them, what you do, and also understand where your vulnerabilities are. Understanding where I may have some risks or openings. If you don't have that financial fraud policy, that's a good one to start with. That's a risk that you want to take care of before you go and really look at insurance, because they're going to ask you for that. Know your assets, know where your data is. If you're routinely putting stuff on spreadsheets, and taking stuff out of Salesforce, dumping it to a spreadsheet with sensitive data, moving it around, know that you're doing that, document it, and kind of know that, hey, if there's a breach that happens, I at least know where the data is. And the insurance companies expect you to keep track of that. Make a list of your users, your sensitive data, who has access to what, your computers as well. Keep inventory. It's kind of like homeowners insurance. If you have an inventory, you can process the claim faster. So there are 8 things that cyber insurance companies look at, and they want you to have these things in place to reduce your risk and lower your premium. The first big one is multi-factor authentication. So that's where you get like a text message or a notification on an app when you go to sign into your apps. Really important that you have that in place. That's like the #1 way to prevent attacks. And the insurance companies are going to basically say, if you don't have this, we may not even consider your application. It just may not be a thing. If you do have it, they're going to ask you what type, is it secure, and how are you monitoring it? But if you don't have it, you may or may not get a good response for insurance companies giving you a good deal. There might be like 2 carriers instead of 50 who are going to pick up your risk. Endpoint detection and response. So on your computer, if something bad happens, somebody downloads a malicious file, a virus, what this does is it kicks it off the internet. and keeps it from spreading. It's software, it's a subscription, it does cost money, but it's something that they're going to be looking for, and it'll help you reduce your premium. Backup and recovery. You need a way to get your data back. They're going to ask that question because they also need something to work with if something bad happens. Email filtering. That matters too. You need a way to filter out those bad emails that are coming in and at least warn people, hey, this email looks suspicious. Better do something about it, report it to somebody. Those are really important things. You have to keep your devices and software up to date. So that's really important as well. Patch management, keep things up to date. Security awareness training, train people on what to look for in those emails. Put them through workshops, have some way of teaching people on how to spot scams, and also teach them about your policies. That's important too. They have to know what's expected of them. Having an incident response plan and a funds transfer policy, those are other key things that they're going to be looking for as well. So those are really the basic essentials there that'll get you in the door and get you to the most cyber insurance companies. I'm going to go back a little bit on multi-factor. So we talked a little bit about passwords. How many nonprofits here have passwords that they share amongst multiple people? Quick show of hands. Yeah. Okay. So guess what doesn't work very well when you share passwords amongst multiple people? Multi-factor authentication. It kind of breaks. And you're left with just a username and password because you're sharing it with a bunch of people. So that kind of breaks this whole thing, and the insurance companies don't look favorably on that. And they're like, oh yeah, well, if you can't put multi-factor on it, that's not an acceptable risk to us. So using password managers is a really, really, really good practice because I know that sometimes we have one license to something that we have to share amongst multiple people, or there's one grants portal that we all need access to, and we have to then share it. But the cool thing about good password managers is that you can share multi-factor with multiple people. And there are a couple of platforms that do a really good job on this. And one of them is called Bitwarden, and the other one is called Keeper. And if you take a look at those, you do have to buy a plan. Dashlane is another one that's effective too. I'll put them in chat. Dashlane, Bitwarden, and Keeper. Those are the three kind of big ones. They are premium plans where you can share an account with multiple people securely and have multi-factor authentication on them. But that's, the best way to do it. It's also kind of nice because it puts everybody's password in a vault. And if somebody leaves the organization, you can take that password list and share it securely with other people in your org. Let's say somebody's out on 2 months leave. You've created these super long, complicated passwords, and now you can share those passwords securely with somebody who's covering for them. Also helps with volunteers. You don't want to give volunteers the passwords. You can give them access with their login to the password manager, and now they can securely put passwords in without even knowing the passwords. So that's a really good way of handling this whole multi-factor authentication issue that's on the cyber insurance essential, because you can say, yes, we use multi-factor authentication for our password manager, and that's the only way that these people are getting access to the password is through the password manager. They don't even know it otherwise. So those three are great ones to look at. TechSoup. How many folks are using TechSoup these days? Yeah, good. TechSoup has Dashlane available on it. I think it's $35 and something like that for TechSoup. So I'm reading Alicia's comment here. You recently had a meeting on MFA for shared passwords and ran into some snags. We discussed the pros and cons of Password Keeper, but didn't have enough info to move forward. So, oh, good. Glad that I could help on that. Yep. The other thing too that you could do too is go passwordless. That's another popular thing. We're using passphrases or little hardware keys to help with this. So, questions here. I'm going to pause for a second before we go on to this next piece here.
Greg, one of the questions I have is about training of staff around these issues, and particularly, like the examples you give of, one staff might like to have things in a spreadsheet, another staff might like to, save documentation in a different way. And there are probably as many ways to save information as you have employees. And so how, that's kind of what's percolating for me, is how to train staff on utilizing, like you can do this and you can't do this. Um, yeah, it just that feels a little overwhelming, just with the breadth of networks and groups and listservs and things that even our small staff have, but seems really essential to have some protocols and practices around that. So like the training piece is what I'm really interested in hearing more about.
Yeah, so let's chat through this a little bit over here. So this page actually has a lot to do with that. Specifically, the second item down, uh, uh, establishing some security policies. So, Allie, I think what you're referring to is kind of collection of do's and don'ts.
Yeah, do's and don'ts, and just understanding that, everyone learns and works in different ways,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But what's the lane, or like the bandwidth, the landscape that of options and choices that we can provide are still maintaining the highest level of safety and security that we can.
yeah. We recommend starting with a document called an acceptable use program and
Mm,
outlining what all of that means. What are the do's and don'ts? What are the guardrails? Because you're absolutely right. What what are the guardrails that we need to set up that people are going to work within? And you want to give people the freedom to use different things in different ways, but that freedom needs those bumpers on the side, so that they kind of know
mhm,
where to stay.
mhm,
I think a lot of this we're seeing with organizations right now. I get a lot of questions, you know, probably daily, hey, is this AI tool safe? Can I use it?
mhm, mhm.
And it's like, okay, safe for what? Right?
Yeah.
So let's establish some ground rules on how do we go through requesting, how do we evaluate things, and how do we make sure that there's basic protocols in place to make sure that people are operating, safely and have the flexibility to use some of the tools that they want to use. That's what an acceptable use program stands up for you. So
Mhm,
establishing those policies and saying, hey, this is acceptable, this isn't, that's a great starting point. And then training people on that. You may not get into the weeds on all the specifics of it, but, um, you know, save your data here, but you can get the guardrails of saying, hey, these are the platforms that we've authorized for use. Don't save your stuff in your personal Gmail.
mhm,
And here's why. you know
mhm, mhm,
Here's why you don't want to forward everything to your personal email for work. Here's why texting about work information is bad. And
mhm,
give people that context so that they can make good decisions, and then you train to that.
mhm, mhm.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense,
Yeah,
on
no,
that
it
end?
it definitely
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah, it's the matter of doing it, but yes.
Yes, absolutely. And doing it over and
And
over
over
and
and
over
over,
again.
yes,
It's got to become
100%.
part of the culture. Yeah.
Mhm,
I, I,
mhm,
I want to add on. I mean, that's such a very insightful question, and I agree. It seems daunting and overwhelming, but I have a few ideas now of like again, like where to start. I'm not sure that it will be or ever will be comprehensive because again, not a security expert. But again, like when you were just talking, Greg, I was like, so many times I was like, well, it's safe for me to text a password to somebody. But then I'm like, wait a minute, maybe that's not safe. So it's just really hard to know like where the exposures are.
It is. And starting with something like like the more expansive workshop that we're doing with nonprofits around cyber boot camps and such, go through like the acceptable use program and start to talk about what those risks are. So let's just pick apart, Alicia, the risk of texting work information, right? So if I routinely start doing texting about work, and maybe I start with that password and I'm like, oh, it's out of band over here. But then I start texting and having a conversation about other stuff related to work with somebody, and I've set the precedent that um, I've transmitted this. I can use text for work purposes, and then people start routinely using it. Well, what happens when there's a lawsuit? And now my information that I've been texting is now discoverable. And some attorney is saying, hey, your business is using texting routinely as a communication tool. Uh, and you have a bring your own device policy, or you don't have a bring your own device policy, and people are just using their own devices. And now the attorneys are saying, oh, wait a second, we need you to open up your iCloud account because there's some allegation that's being made against your organization, and the person you were texting ha, has it on record that you texted them this, and our easiest path to get the information is through your iCloud. That happened. That happened a couple months ago to an org that we worked with, and they had to open up people's text messages. And when you open up somebody's iCloud, it opens up everything. So those are the types of things that you have to consider. It's not just the password security; it's setting the precedent that you know um, these types of things are now acceptable. And you want to be able to control where you put your information and set that and inform people of the risk of that.
Okay, that's again very a lot there to ponder, but I think it's because of course we do use texting but I can see now why texting passwords and whatnot probably not a wise idea.
No, not a wise idea. And then, not a wise idea to encourage text for business purposes. You want to keep people's personal lives as separate as you can
Mm.
from
Okay.
from their work lives. If something happens at work, you don't want them to open up their whole iCloud.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. So anyway, kind of going off of this slide, we jump down to security policies, but where does that tone start? At the top. You're all executive leaders and your boards. Having these conversations with your boards about this type of risk is really important. IT is responsible for executing, but they're not accountable. Accountability starts at the board level and at the executive level. And you have to set the tone at the top for this. So establish your security policies, establish your response procedures. What are we going to do when bad stuff happens? And then be proactive about it. Being here today is being proactive, and that's great. Um, some practical tools for you. So security software. Uh, some of the things that we covered in the cyber insurance slide relate to this. You need to invest in software to protect your organization. Microsoft has a donation program at TechSoup. There's a business premium plan for Microsoft 365. The donation program has just ended. Well, it's going to end as of July 1. If you haven't picked up your licenses yet under this donation program, July 1 is the deadline. If you go to Microsoft's website and sign up today, you will get 10 free licenses of this business premium SKU, which has a lot of security features in it, and you'll get it free for a year. And then you'll have to pay $5.75 per user per month after that, or $5.50. I can't remember the exact price on that. But it's a great platform to serve as a foundation for your security program. Password managers, Dashlane is offered on TechSoup, Keeper, and Bitwarden are also very quality products. Training programs, you want to implement cybersecurity training for your staff, improve awareness, and then utilizing resources such as TechSoup, N10, others are really important as well. Does anybody have any go-to resources that they use in the nonprofit community, other than Novus, TechSoup, to learn about cybersecurity? Anybody have anything that they would want to share? Nope. We put out a lot of stuff, so stay tuned to us. But TechSoup has some great stuff too, so highly would recommend them. In conclusion, the threats are evolving. Everyone's a target. You have to prioritize cybersecurity. Insurance is not an expensive thing, in the scheme of things for the value that it provides. But then also communicate with your boards on this risk, communicate with stakeholders inside your organization about this risk. It's not going anywhere, it's getting worse. And, we have to be prepared to deal with this. So just wanted to say thank you. I know we have about 9 minutes left to the program, but if anybody has additional questions, I'd be happy to, answer anything that anybody has right now. Questions, thoughts, comments, anything that anybody has. Alicia, I think you're on mute there.
I was just muttering this was really great, and thank you to the Community Foundation. This is
Thank
very helpful.
you.
Very, very helpful.
And
Matt.
I was just going to mention that our friends at Novus have offered an opportunity for anyone who participated today, registered for this webinar, if they would like to have a 30-minute consultation to talk about challenges that you have at your organization, or just talk through your next steps. They are available to do that. And I am going to drop Shannon's email in the chat. You can reach out to Shannon Emery to schedule those 30-minute consultations. So thank you very much to Novus for all of your expertise and guidance today. Greg, this was very helpful. A little scary, but we have to do it. We can do hard things. But also thank you for the ongoing support.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having us today. And, as Allison said, we're happy to hop on a 30-minute call. We can also do a one-on-one threat simulation with folks so you can kind of see what a data breach might cost your organization. And then we give you a little risk assessment that tells you kind of where you're at on that path to cyber insurability. So happy to do that with anybody at any time.
Thank you, Greg.
So much for that.
All right. You are all very welcome. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Allison.
Thank
you all.
you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.